Take that uniform off right now. The voice cracked across Terminal D like a whip, sharp, angry, and echoing through the bright glass corridor. Officer Travis Boone, coffee trembling in his hand, barked again. I said now, "Soldier, you think you can play dress up on Independence Day?" Travelers froze. The carousel stopped mid-spin. A baby cried somewhere behind the ticket counter, and Master Sergeant Elijah Washington, standing tall in his pressed dress blues, felt every eye in the terminal turn toward him. Before going into this story, where are you watching from today? Drop it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give me a like if you believe respect for service should never depend on skin color. Eli's boots were still dusty from cobble soil, his shoulders stiff beneath metals that had seen real fire. 36 hours earlier, he'd been crouched under a night sky halfway around the world. Now he was home, standing under fluorescent light, trying to steady his breathing as the voice of authority twisted into insult. He'd dreamed of this homecoming for months. The hug from his daughter Amaya, the smell of Texas barbecue drifting through July heat. But that dream began to collapse the moment Boone's words struck the air. The airport was alive with patriotic noise. Red, white, blue bunting draped the glass walls. Loudspeakers blared parade schedules and country songs about freedom. TSA agents laughed over coffee. But for Eli, each sound folded into the hum of static that never left his mind. Memories of mortars, engines, the weight of silence before an explosion. He inhaled, exhaled, grounding himself as he had done through countless missions. This wasn't Afghanistan, he told himself. This was home. Amaya was waiting by the baggage carousel, clutching a glitter sign she'd made by hand. 1,142 days. Welcome home. Daddy. She was only 12 but carried her mother's fire, her eyes shining through tears. She had filmed his landing, counting down the seconds until he appeared. Her heart leapt when she saw him. She ran, laughter bursting through the crowd. "Daddy!" she shouted, her voice full of life, but as she reached him, the officers stepped between them. Boone's partner, Officer Kayla Roth, looked younger, but her face was drawn tight. Her fingers hovered near her taser. She glanced at Eli's ribbons as if they were counterfeit bills. "Sir, we've had a report of someone impersonating military personnel," she said flatly. "I need to see your identification." Eli blinked. Confused? Impersonating? He handed over his common access card, his driver's license, and his deployment orders. "Everything's right there. Officer, I just came off Flight 1427 from Atlanta." Boone scoffed. "These are easy to fake. You got this uniform at a surplus store?" His voice dripped with contempt. He was still nursing the hangover from the night before, still stewing over the message from his teenage son. Fake soldier in blues. Terminal D. Bust him. Dad. Boone had laughed when he got it. He didn't think he'd actually act on it. But now, looking at Eli's calm face, something ugly rose up inside him. A blend of resentment, guilt, and the bitter ache of a man who'd lost control of his life. Eli didn't flinch. "That ribbon you're holding, officer," he said evenly, "is a Bronze Star. I earned it in Helmand Province. Please don't touch it again." The warning only fueled Boone's anger. "You threatening me?" he growled. He reached forward, gripping the edge of Eli's uniform jacket. Roth hesitated but didn't stop him. The crowd began to murmur. Phones lifted into the air, recording. Eli's training told him to de-escalate. He could see Boone's trembling hands, smell the sour coffee on his breath. "Sir," he said quietly, "you're making a mistake." Boone didn't hear reason anymore. His finger jabbed toward Eli's chest. "Drop the act before I charge you." Roth's hand brushed her body cam, pretending to check the battery. Then, with a quiet click, she turned it off. Sun glare interference. She muttered, almost to herself. The terminal seemed to hold its breath. Boone's voice dropped low, venomous. "Get on your knees." Eli froze. For a heartbeat. The world narrowed to the distant sound of luggage wheels and Amaya's frightened gasp. He'd survived gunfire, explosions, ambushes, but humiliation, that was different. "I'm not resisting," he said. "You're about to cuff a U.S. soldier on the 4th of July. Boone shoved him anyway. Eli hit the floor hard, his knee slamming against the tile. Roth pressed a boot between his shoulder blades. The cold steel of the cuffs bit into his wrists. Cameras flashed. Someone shouted, "He's a veteran!" Another voice rose, "Leave him alone!" Amaya's sign dropped to the ground. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, streaming through tears. "They're arresting my dad," she cried. "And he's wearing his uniform." The video spread in seconds. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok. Strangers across the country saw the image of a decorated black soldier face down on the floor of an airport while patriotic music played overhead. Eli closed his eyes, forcing calm through the storm in his chest. He remembered his daughter's promise the night before he deployed for the last time. "Come home safe, Daddy. Don't fight unless you have to." Those words were now his anchor. Roth looked down at him. Something flickered in her eyes, a shadow of memory. Her partner bleeding out in her arms 2 years ago during a mall shooting. She'd built armor around that pain, but now it cracked. "Boone, maybe we should." "Shut it!" Boone barked. "Let me handle this." Amaya's voice trembled, broadcasting live to the world. "This is my dad," she said, turning the camera toward his face. "He served 1,142 days overseas. He came home today. The numbers meant everything. 1,142 days of separation. 1,142 mornings without a hug. Now, those same numbers became a rallying cry as her live stream count soared into the hundreds of thousands. An old veteran waiting nearby whispered, "That man's no fake. Look at his eyes." He tried to step forward, but Boone ordered him back. "One more move. Old timer, and you're next." For Eli. Time slowed. His pulse matched the rhythm of his breathing. Steady, trained. The weight of the cuffs, the flash of cameras, the roar of a crowd turning against authority. It all blurred into one clear thought. Stay calm. Protect her. Don't give them what they want. When the backup officers arrived, Boone exaggerated his report. Possible imposter. Resisted questioning. He said into his radio, his voice cold and rehearsed. He didn't notice Amaya's phone capturing every word. A few bystanders began to chant softly, "Let him go!" It grew louder. "Let him go!" Boone turned red with rage. "Everyone step back!" Eli looked up from the floor, his face steady despite the humiliation. His voice was calm, deep, and clear. "You see this uniform?" he said. "It's not a costume. It's a promise. In that instant." The words cut through the chaos. They carried the weight of every soldier who had ever returned home to suspicion instead of welcome. The moment became history, frozen in 1,000 screens, broadcast to millions who hadn't planned to witness injustice before lunch. It was 9:40 a.m. on the 4th of July, and a man who had risked his life for his country was handcuffed beneath its flag, and somewhere beyond the glass walls of the terminal, the sound of fireworks testing in the distance mixed with the echo of a nation's shame. Uniform off. Now. Officer Boone's command sliced through the carousel's chatter like a blade. He wasn't yelling anymore. His voice had dropped to a dangerous calm that every soldier recognizes. The tone of a man who's decided he's right, no matter the evidence. Eli stood still beside Carousel 7, the smell of coffee and jet fuel mixing in the air. He'd faced insurgents with bombs strapped to their chests, but somehow this, being ordered to strip his honor, cut deeper. Boone's sunglasses reflected Eli's calm face. The officer's fingers twitched near his belt. "You heard me? Take it off. You're insulting real soldiers wearing that thing." Eli didn't move. Sir, I am a real soldier, United States Army, 3rd Infantry Division, Bronze Star for Valor, Afghanistan. My ID's right here. He produced his common access card and a laminated DD-214, each sealed and clean from years of deployment. Roth stepped forward, eyeing them with suspicion. Fakes are easy, she muttered, scanning the QR code on her phone but not waiting for a result. Boone took the documents, flipped them over, and smirked. You people always got some fancy story. He held up the Bronze Star ribbon between 2 fingers. So, this what you bought online? Eli's voice stayed level. That's for pulling my men out of an ambush. You'll put it down now. Boone laughed, short, bitter, the laugh of a man who's been laughed at too many times in his own life. What? You gonna sue me? Eli's tone hardened. If you keep touching that metal. Yes. The crowd around them thickened. Families stopped mid-step. Children tugged at their parents' sleeves, confused. Someone began recording. Boone noticed the phones but didn't stop, if anything. The cameras fed his pride. You think that uniform makes you untouchable? He sneered. Let's see what's underneath. He reached for Eli's collar. Roth shifted uneasily. Travis! Maybe we should call it in. Boone snapped. You think I need help telling real from fake? His hand tore at the fabric. Buttons popped. The sound, sharp, humiliating, echoed under the carousel's fluorescent hum. Eli stepped back, instinctively steadying himself. Years of discipline pulsed through him. Do not react. Do not fight. Do not become the story. But his eyes met Boone's, and for one brief second, the soldier inside him burned through the calm. Officer, Eli said quietly, you're crossing a line you can't uncross. Roth's finger hovered near her camera. The red light blinked once, then went dark. Body cam malfunction, she said flatly, as though she were reading a weather report. Sun glare interference. It was the 9th time she'd used that excuse this year. Boone pushed forward. On your knees. Eli's voice dropped an octave. Excuse me? I said down. You're under arrest for impersonating military personnel. Boone's hand pressed his shoulder, forcing him down. The terminal gasped as the veteran's knees hit the floor. Amaya's scream cracked the air. Stop! He didn't do anything. She tried to push through, but a bystander held her back. Boone cuffed Eli roughly, the metal biting into his wrists. Anything you say can and will be used against you, he muttered, half out of habit, half out of spite. Roth looked away. Her pulse raced, her palms sweating under her gloves. Images of her dead partner flashed behind her eyes. The blood, the helplessness, the weight of guilt that never left. To her, control was safety. And now, watching Eli's calm defiance, she mistook his composure for threat. The crowd began murmuring louder. A man in a Delta pilot uniform stepped forward. Officer, that man's a soldier. Look at his service bars, Boone snapped. Back off before I detain you too. Phones lifted higher. Screens captured every second. A mother whispered to her teenage son. Record it. Honey, get everything. Eli's breathing deepened. He could feel his pulse pounding against the cuffs. My daughter's right there, he said quietly. You're scaring her. Boone's jaw tightened. Then tell her daddy shouldn't lie to cops. Amaya's trembling hands held her phone high. The live counter jumped by the hundreds. They're arresting my dad, she cried into the camera, and he's wearing his uniform. A notification pinged. Then another. The stream spread like wildfire. Dallas, Houston, Chicago, D.C., a digital chain reaction. Boone didn't notice. He was too busy lecturing. You think medals make you special? You think service gives you a pass? Eli met his glare. No, I think it earns a little respect. Roth's voice cracked. Maybe we should verify before... Boone cut her off. We're verifying right now. Imposter test. He jabbed a finger toward Eli's chest. "What's the Army motto, huh?" Eli's expression didn't change. "This will defend." Boone paused for a split second. The arrogance faltered. Then came anger to fill the void. "You rehearsed that," he muttered. "Get him up." Roth yanked Eli by the arm. He didn't resist. His eyes found Amaya again. Terrified. Crying. "Live to the world." "It's okay, baby," he called softly. "Keep recording. Don't stop." The words would later become a rallying cry across social media. A father's calm under humiliation. A soldier's dignity under suspicion. 2 more officers approached, unsure what they were walking into. Boone waved them off. "Handled," he said, dragging Eli toward the benches by gate D22. Amaya followed. "Filming! You can't do this!" she shouted. "He's a hero!" Boone turned, his face red. "You want to join him, little girl?" That was the moment everything shifted. The bystanders moved closer. One man shouted, "Hey, leave the kid alone!" A woman called 911, not knowing the police were already there. Boone's radio crackled, dispatch requesting confirmation. He pressed transmit, suspect in custody, sending ID for validation. He didn't send it. He couldn't. His pride had locked him in. Roth's throat tightened. "Travis, this doesn't feel right," Boone muttered. "Nothing ever does till the paperwork's done." Eli sat on the floor beside the carousel, cuffs cutting into skin, metals glinting under harsh light. He'd seen men die with more dignity than this moment. Still, he straightened his back. "You know," he said quietly, "you're teaching my daughter something today." Boone sneered. "Yeah? What's that?" "That sometimes the uniform doesn't protect you from the people it protects." The silence that followed felt heavier than any explosion. Roth looked away. The carousel belts hummed again, spitting luggage into a forgotten rhythm. Overhead, the airport PA system crackled cheerfully about holiday fireworks downtown. Eli's reflection in the glass showed a man both broken and unbent behind him. Amaya's live stream crossed 1 million views. The moment sealed itself into history. A soldier on his knees, accused of pretending to be what he truly was, on the very day the country celebrated freedom. And while Boone smirked, believing the world saw him in control, the world was already turning against him, second by second, pixel by pixel. "Sit still." "Hero." Boone's words came out as a hiss while he yanked the cuffs tighter, pressing Eli down against the armrest of a steel bench near gate D22. The noise of the terminal swirled around them, rolling luggage wheels, flight announcements, a child's cry. And still, the scene felt unnaturally loud. Eli's wrists burned. Blood trickled down from the scrape on his temple where Boone's ring had caught him. Above them, sunlight poured through the high glass roof, harsh and unrelenting, like a spotlight that refused to blink. By 10:05 a.m., the crowd had grown thick around the bench. Holiday travelers with flags and balloon hats now stood shoulder to shoulder, phones raised high. A pair of flight attendants whispered to each other, recognizing Eli's insignia, 3rd Infantry Division. One murmured, "That's real." But Boone didn't hear them. He stood rigid, sweating through his uniform, his pride and fear tangled into one. "You move." I add resisting arrest. He said. Eli didn't move. He sat upright despite the weight of the cuffs. "Officer," he said quietly, "you're making a mistake." Boone gave a hard laugh. "You people always say that, across the walkway." Amaya's phone streamed live. Her small voice trembled, but her grip was steady. "They have my dad in handcuffs. He just got back from Afghanistan." She turned the camera to his face. Blood at the temple, calm eyes, steady breathing, and the image struck something deep in everyone who saw it. Within minutes, the live stream hit 100,000 views by the time she whispered. He didn't do anything wrong. The counter had jumped to 600,000. Eli looked around the terminal, scanning faces, gauging risk. Years of training made him read the room like a battlefield. Fear in the crowd meant volatility. Panic could spread faster than gunfire. He focused on Amaya's voice, her shaky breaths grounding him. "Stay where you are, baby," he said softly. "Don't come closer." Boone turned toward her, face tight. "Turn that off." "She's a child," Eli warned, his voice low, measured. "Then control her." Boone snapped. The tension reached its breaking point when an older man stepped forward from the crowd. His gray hair was cropped short, his chest still broad under a faded Marine Corps jacket. "That's Master Sergeant Elijah Washington," he bellowed, voice shaking with fury. "I served with men like him. Uncuff him now." Boone spun around. "Back off, old man." But the veteran didn't back down. He stepped closer, pointing to the ribbons on Eli's chest. "That star isn't for show. You disgrace every badge in this terminal." Roth moved fast, pulling her zip ties from her belt. "Sir, step aside." When he didn't. She looped the ties around his wrists. The plastic clicked shut. The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "She zip-tied a Medal of Honor vet." The word spread like lightning through the crowd, through the comments section, through every corner of social media. Amaya's live stream surged past 1 million views. Hearts and angry emojis flooded the feed. Voices began to rise in real life. Shouts of "Uncuff them." "He's innocent. This is America, not a police state." Boone barked at the crowd. Everyone step back. But it was too late. The bystanders had become witnesses. 2 airline pilots dropped their luggage and stood guard beside the bench. A woman in uniform called out, "He's wearing an authorized patch. You can't detain him." Her name tag read Lot Hayes, Delta Airlines. Boone's jaw twitched. "You want to join him too, Lieutenant?" Hayes didn't flinch. "You lay another finger on that soldier and I'll call base command myself." Roth hesitated. Her heart raced, sweat pooling at her collar. She looked at Eli, calm, breathing steady, eyes that weren't angry, just tired. "Maybe we should radio for verification," she whispered. Boone shook his head. "You think command's going to back me up after this goes viral?" "No. We finish what we started." The words made her stomach twist. Eli lifted his head. "You've already finished it," he said softly. "The world's watching." He wasn't wrong. On screen, the comments poured in by the thousands. "Free the soldier." "This is what's wrong with America." Hashtag uniform of honor. Then a new figure appeared at the edge of the crowd, a tall man in a worn blue jacket, walking with a cane. When he reached the front line of onlookers, the chant fell silent. Every camera turned toward him. "Sergeant Major Darius Kane." Someone whispered, "Medal of Honor, Vietnam." Kane's voice boomed. "Uncuff this man. That's an order." Boone's lips curled. "I don't take orders from civilians, then take them from a soldier who earned the right to give them." Kane shot back, stepping forward. Roth moved automatically, blocking him. "Sir, please." He raised both hands. "Don't you dare sir me while you hold another soldier like a criminal." His cane thumped against the floor. "You've forgotten who you serve." The crowd erupted in cheers. People held flags high, chanting, "Let him go! Let him go!" Boone's hand hovered near his taser. "Back off!" Kane stood his ground. "Do it! And the only thing you'll hit is your career." For a moment. Even Boone seemed to feel the weight of that truth. He turned his head toward Roth. "Zip tie him too." She hesitated, trembling. "Travis, please, do it," he barked. Her hands shook as she followed the order. The sound of the ties locking echoed through the terminal, sharp and final. Eli looked at Kane, their eyes meeting through the chaos. The older man smiled faintly. "Don't lose your calm, son. They want your anger." Eli nodded once. "Yes. Sergeant Major, the 2 soldiers, one in cuffs, one bound by plastic. sat side by side under the harsh Texas sun pouring through glass. Around them, a crowd of thousands watched the scene unfold like a living courtroom. Boone paced, breathing hard, muttering about keeping order. Roth looked pale, lost somewhere between fear and regret. Her gaze lingered on Amaya, tiny, shaking, tears glistening on her cheeks. For an instant, the hardened shell around her cracked. She remembered the night her partner died, the blood on her hands, the helplessness. She turned away, whispering to herself, "Not again." By now, airport management had locked down Terminal D. Flights were grounded, gates sealed. Delta pilots refused to board until the detained men were released. TSA officers whispered nervously, unsure which side of the line they stood on. Eli sat silent amid the uproar, watching people choose between comfort and conscience. He felt the old ache in his chest, the familiar loneliness of command. "They'll call this disturbing the peace," he said under his breath. But peace never comes without truth. When Boone demanded a patrol car, dispatch refused. "Chief Delgado wants all movement frozen until review," the voice said over the radio. Boone cursed, realizing for the first time how little power he still held. Amaya's stream crossed 2 million views. The feed filled with breaking news alerts, hashtags, politicians tagging the Department of Defense. CNN anchors were already rehearsing their opening lines. Through it all, Eli remained still. He had learned long ago that silence can be the loudest weapon of all. The noise around him blurred into something distant, almost rhythmic, like the thrum of a helicopter he'd once heard before rescue. He turned to Kane. "Feels like we're still in the field," he murmured. Kane smiled, battered but proud. "Only difference. Son, is this battle's being fought with cameras instead of rifles?" As Boone stormed away to make another call, the veteran leaned closer. "Hold your ground. Reinforcements are coming." Eli nodded. He didn't know how or when, but he believed him. Somewhere out there, someone had seen the truth, and that truth was already on its way back through the sky toward Dallas, and above the chaos, through the wide glass walls. The Texas sun burned on, refusing to look away. Enough. The single word came from behind the line of officers, sharp as a gavel crack. Lieutenant Colonel Vanessa Park strode through the security gate like a storm breaking glass. Sunlight hit her brass insignia, flashing across her JAG uniform as she crossed the floor with a file case in one hand and a look that could silence a general. "Who authorized this detention?" she demanded. No one answered. Boone's mouth opened, then closed again. Around them, the crowd parted instinctively, the sea of phones still recording. Even the airport loudspeakers went quiet, as if the building itself understood the gravity of what had arrived. Vanessa's voice carried command born from 25 years of service, and the kind of courtroom precision that left no room for excuse. She dropped a printed document onto the table beside Boone. Department of Defense verification, Master Sergeant Elijah Washington, service number 448-67-9132, Bronze Star, Afghanistan, honorably discharged June 3rd, redeployed July 2nd. You detained him 48 hours after his last active tour. Now. She leaned closer, her tone lowering to a dangerous calm. "You're going to tell me why?" Boone stiffened. He fit a report. "From who?" Boone hesitated. His eyes flicked toward Roth, who stood pale and trembling near the bench. Anonymous tip. Vanessa opened her iPad, tapping once. The screen lit with the report header. Anonymous tip. My foot. I traced it before I landed. It came from a Cody Boone. Age 16. Your son. The color drained from Boone's face. "That's classified." "Not anymore," she said flatly. "Your boy thought he'd play a prank. You decided to make it real. And in doing so, You humiliated a soldier who's done more for this country in one tour than you have in 20 years on the payroll. The crowd murmured, the sound swelling like distant thunder. Amaya, still holding her phone, zoomed in on her father's calm face. Eli spoke softly, his voice steady but heavy. "Ma'am, I told them who I was. I showed them everything. They didn't want to see it." Vanessa turned toward him, her expression softening for the first time. "You did right. Sergeant, you stayed disciplined. You kept your composure." Then her gaze snapped back to Boone. "He acted like a soldier. You acted like a disgrace." Boone slammed his fist on the table. "You can't come in here barking orders. This is police jurisdiction." Vanessa didn't blink. Jurisdiction? She swiped on her tablet, playing an audio file through the terminal's speakers. The line crackled. Then the voice of a Pentagon watch officer filled the air. "Lieutenant Colonel Park, your authority is confirmed under Federal Code 10, Section 772. You're authorized to intervene in cases involving unlawful detention of active or recently discharged service members." The statement hit Boone like a hammer. His mouth twitched, but no sound came out. Vanessa leaned forward, calm but lethal. "That means every second he's been cuffed has been a federal violation." Roth's hands shook. She whispered, "I told you we should have verified." Boone turned on her. "You turned off your body cam." She swallowed hard. "Because I couldn't." Her voice broke. "I couldn't watch another man die in front of me." "Travis, I thought if I stopped recording, maybe it wouldn't become another nightmare on the news." Her words cracked something in the air. The noise in the terminal faded. Boone stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. "You killed the footage?" She nodded, tears streaking her face. "I didn't want another body on the ground, but I didn't stop you either." Vanessa's eyes flicked between them. 9 prior camera deactivations, she said, voice like iron, all under sun glare interference. That's not malfunction. That's misconduct. She turned to the crowd. For every one of those times, someone probably walked away bruised, or worse, unseen. Boone's anger flared again. Desperate. "You don't understand what it's like out here. Every day someone's pointing something at you. A phone, a knife, a lie. You get tired. You make mistakes." Vanessa's tone softened but never lost its edge. "I buried soldiers who made mistakes. Officer, they owned them. They didn't hide behind excuses." Eli raised his head. "I taught my daughter the uniform means honor," he said quietly, the words carrying through the silent crowd. "Today she's learning it means handcuffs. For the first time." Roth looked directly at him. Their eyes met, hers full of guilt, his full of restrained grief. She whispered, "I'm sorry." Eli nodded once. "Then prove it. Tell the truth." Roth stepped forward, trembling. The report was fake. Boone knew it. We both did. Boone's jaw locked. "You shut your mouth." Vanessa turned to the nearest officer. "Uncuff Sergeant Washington." No one moved. Boone barked. "Don't you dare!" Vanessa's voice cracked like thunder. "That's an order." The officer hesitated, then stepped forward. The key turned. The metal clicked open. The sound rang through the terminal like a church bell. Eli stood slowly, rubbing his wrists. His shoulders straightened. The applause started softly. One person clapping near the crowd barrier, then grew until it filled the entire terminal. Boone shouted. "This isn't over!" Vanessa faced him squarely. "No, it isn't. But your career is..." She handed him a folded document. "Effective immediately. You are suspended pending a tribunal review under Chief Marcus Delgado's authority. Turn in your badge." Boone's hands shook as he stared at the paper. "You don't have that power." She smiled faintly. "You're right. But he does." Chief Marcus Delgado stood at the far end of the terminal, gray-faced but unyielding, watching from behind a line of officers. He'd arrived quietly during the chaos, his body thin from chemotherapy, his voice gravelly but commanding. "Travis," he said, stepping forward. "Give her the badge." Boone froze, tears of rage forming in his eyes. "Sir, you can't do this to me." Delgado's tone softened. "Son, you did this to yourself." He looked to Eli, his eyes glistening. "On July 4th, 21 years ago, my boy died in Fallujah wearing that same uniform you disrespected today." He turned back to Boone. "You don't get to soil that memory." Boone stared, shaking, then slowly unclipped his badge and dropped it into Delgado's open hand. Vanessa gave a single nod. "We'll convene a tribunal at 1500 hours, both of you," she said to Boone and Roth. "We'll attend." Roth's voice barely rose above a whisper. "Yes, ma'am." Eli turned to Amaya, who ran forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. She clung to him, her small hands gripping his jacket. "You're free, Daddy." He smiled faintly, exhaustion settling into his bones. Freedom's always earned twice. Sweetheart, once on the field and once at home. The crowd erupted again. Phones lifted, flashes bursting. Reporters swarmed as Vanessa guided them through the side gate as they stepped into the sunlight, the roar of the airport behind them fading. Vanessa placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. "You did everything right, Sergeant. The system failed you, not the other way around." He looked at her with tired eyes. "Then fix it, ma'am, for the next one who won't have a camera." She nodded. "That's why I came." The terminal doors closed behind them with a hiss, sealing away the noise of the crowd, the chaos, and the humiliation. What remained was silence, and the first breath of justice finally breaking through the static. By 1:30 that afternoon, Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport was no longer an airport. It was a courtroom without walls. Every terminal screen glowed with the same viral clip, a decorated black soldier in handcuffs beneath the 4th of July banners. His 12-year-old daughter crying into a live stream watched by millions. Travelers who had once hurried toward gates now stood frozen, scrolling, whispering, choosing sides. The hum of engines had given way to the hum of outrage. The video of Eli's arrest spread faster than wildfire in dry wind. Within an hour, the clip appeared on CNN, Fox, and MSNBC. Hashtags multiplied. Hashtag Uniform of Honor. Hashtag Justice for Eli. Hashtag July for Shame. United Airlines posted, "Respect for service is non-negotiable." Delta Airlines, already tied to the terminal where it happened, went further, "We stand with Master Sergeant Washington and all who serve." The statement alone reached 30 million views in 10 minutes. Inside the DFW press room, journalist Maya Chen was piecing together her report. She'd seen 1,000 stories of bias, but this one hit different. A father, a child, a flag, and the nation's birthday. It carried a symbolism she couldn't ignore. "We're live in Dallas," she said into the camera, standing beside Amaya, whose small hands clutched the same phone that had filmed everything. This young girl's courage has ignited a national conversation about race, respect, and accountability. Amaya's eyes were red but steady. "I didn't mean to go viral," she said softly. "I just wanted someone to help my dad." The comment section flooded with hearts and tears. Across the terminal, passengers clapped as the feed played overhead. But upstairs, behind frosted glass, Chief Marcus Delgado was staring at the same footage in silence. The old Marine's fingers trembled around a mug of cold coffee. He'd served in Fallujah, lost his son there exactly 21 years ago that day, watching Eli's calm under pressure. The resemblance struck deep. His son had been the same age when he deployed, the same kind of soldier, quiet, disciplined, believing in honor more than survival. Delgado closed his eyes, hearing his boy's last radio call echo in memory. "Tell Dad I did my duty. Now." Duty looked like something else. Public reckoning. "Sir," his assistant whispered. stepping in. "The union's demanding we pull the footage offline until we can review." Delgado looked up. "No," he said. "If the truth burns us." We stand in the fire. At that very moment, across town in a small Dallas apartment, Boone's son Cody sat on the edge of his bed, phone in hand, face ghost pale. He'd seen the live stream a dozen times now. His prank text, fake soldier in blues. Terminal D wasn't funny anymore. His father's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. And guilt, sharp and relentless, pushed him toward the one thing he could still do right. He logged into an anonymous email account and attached every file he'd secretly copied from his father's home computer. 14 internal complaints against Officer Boone. Each marked closed. Insufficient evidence. He included a folder labeled cam footage _deleted. Proof that 9 times. Boone and Roth had disabled their cameras before incidents involving minority detainees. Then, with trembling hands, he hit send to the Dallas Tribune, CNN, and the Department of Justice tip line at 2:15. Maya Chen's phone buzzed. She glanced down, eyes widening as the files loaded. Her voice caught in her throat. "It's bigger than we thought." She murmured, "So much bigger." Within minutes, news alerts spread nationwide. The headline read, "DFW officer behind viral detainment, had 14 prior complaints and repeated camera tampering." Public reaction turned from sympathy to fury. Protesters began gathering outside the airport, waving flags not for celebration, but for justice. By 2:30, the airport command line was in chaos. Calls poured in from the governor's office, the Pentagon, and the White House press liaison. Federal oversight was inevitable now, inside the security wing. Boone sat red-faced, pounding the desk. "This is a witch hunt," he shouted. "One video and they forget 20 years I gave to this job." Roth sat across the table, silent, staring at her hands. She hadn't stopped shaking since Eli was released. "You didn't give 20 years," she said quietly. "You took them, from people who never fought back." He glared at her. "You're no saint. You shut off that camera same as me." She didn't deny it. Difference is, "I regret it." Outside, the noise grew louder. Chants of "uncuff the truth" and "justice for Eli." News vans lined the parking lanes. The airport's PR team couldn't contain the flood. Meanwhile, in the press hall, Amaya was surrounded by microphones. "Do you think your dad will forgive them?" one reporter asked. Amaya paused, thinking hard. "He'll forgive," she said softly. "But he won't forget. None of us should." The line hit like poetry. Within minutes, it became the top quote of the day, played again and again on every network. Delgado watched the coverage unfold, the noise of the crowd bleeding through his office windows. His cancer medication sat untouched beside his desk. For years, he'd carried the weight of a department buried in excuses and bureaucracy. Now, maybe. He saw a chance to leave something better behind. He turned to his deputy. "Call the council. 3 p.m. emergency tribunal. No excuses." The deputy blinked. "Sir, on the 4th of July?" "Yes," Delgado said. "Today's supposed to mean freedom. Let's remind people what that word costs." By 2:45. The command went out. All DFW police operations suspended pending tribunal hearing. TSA agents and pilots applauded when they heard. Social media exploded again. This time with hope. Maya broadcast live from the steps outside the tribunal room. "Chief Delgado has called an emergency hearing. The nation is watching what happens in Dallas today. Upstairs, in the holding wing." Eli sat quietly with Vanessa Park. His wrists were still red from the cuffs, but his posture remained strong. "You don't have to stay for this," she told him. He smiled faintly. "I do. If they're going to talk about me. They're going to see me." She studied him for a long moment. "You remind me why I stayed in uniform," she said. Because someone has to... Down the hall. Boone paced, muttering under his breath. The weight of exposure had shifted everything. His name now synonymous with disgrace. His badge suspended. His son's betrayal quietly spreading through newsrooms. Roth sat with her head in her hands, whispering a prayer she hadn't said since her partner's funeral, when 3 o'clock approached. Delgado stood before the mirror in his office, straightened his marine pin, and whispered to his reflection, "For my boy, for them all." Then he turned and walked toward the tribunal room. Outside, Amaya's live stream was still rolling, 2.3 million people watching. The screen shook slightly as she whispered to her followers, "They're finally going to listen." And as the doors of that third-floor conference room opened, every camera in America turned its lens toward Dallas, waiting to see if justice would finally wear its own uniform. The clock on the wall hit 3 o'clock sharp when Chief Marcus Delgado entered the sealed third-floor conference room. The air conditioning hummed softly, but the heat of the afternoon still pressed against the windows. Inside, there were no cameras, no reporters, just 6 people, the smell of stale coffee, and the quiet hum of consequence. At the far end sat Travis Boone, his face drawn and blotchy, jaw clenched like a man preparing for war. Across from him sat Kayla Roth, pale and trembling, uniform collar wilted from sweat. Between them sat the man who had endured them both, Master Sergeant Elijah Washington, calm, steady, the kind of calm that unnerves the guilty. On Delgado's right was Lieutenant Colonel Vanessa Park, representing the Department of Defense, her tablet open with DoD seals glowing faintly. Maya Chen sat beside her, invited as a press witness under Delgado's personal order. "If this department's going to bleed," he had said, "it's not going to do it behind closed doors." Delgado's voice broke the silence first. "We are convened to address the events of July 4th, involving the unlawful detention of Master Sergeant Elijah Washington at Terminal D." His tone was tired but resolute, the sound of a man who had carried too many failures and was done carrying any more. "Let's start with the facts." Vanessa tapped her tablet. The video from the live stream played on the wall-mounted monitor. Boone's voice, cold and arrogant. "Uniform off, now." Roth's voice, tense. "Fakes are easy." And then Eli's calm reply, "That's for saving my squad. Touch it again. I sue." The footage rolled on. His arrest, his restraint, Amaya's terrified voice, the crowd's outrage. No one spoke. Boone's eyes darted toward the screen and away again. Roth looked as if she might break apart. When the video ended, Vanessa spoke quietly. "Every second of that recording is verified. Body cam data was missing. Deleted manually. We recovered fragments from cloud storage." She swiped again. A series of timestamps appeared. 9 camera shutdowns by Roth, 14 misconduct complaints by Boone, all within 3 years. "This isn't one bad day," Vanessa said. "It's a pattern." Boone slammed his palm on the table. "You people don't know what it's like. We deal with threats every minute. We're judged for every breath we take." Delgado's gaze lifted slowly. "You think that's unique to you?" He leaned forward, eyes tired but piercing. "Try commanding Marines in Fallujah while your son's unit is burning 50 yards away. Then tell me about pressure." Boone's face twitched. "You can't compare." "I can." Delgado interrupted, his tone suddenly sharp. "Because my boy died in a uniform like Sergeant Washington's, and you spat on that same uniform when you threw him to the ground." The room went still. Boone's mouth worked soundlessly. Roth broke the silence. "Chief," she said softly, "I need to speak." Delgado nodded. "Go ahead." Her hands twisted in her lap. "I shut off my camera because—" She hesitated, searching for air. "My partner was shot last year in a mall attack. I watched him bleed out while I was live streaming the scene. Every night I hear that audio. Every scream. I couldn't. Her voice cracked. I couldn't hear another man die. So, I told myself, if I turned it off, maybe I wouldn't relive it. I was wrong. I failed him. I failed this man. She turned toward Eli, eyes glistening. I'm sorry, Sergeant. I was supposed to protect. I made it worse. Eli's face softened, though his voice stayed even. Owning it is the first step. Officer, but apology without change is just noise. Roth nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then I'll make it count. Boone snorted. Save your speeches. You think crying fixes anything? Delgado's voice rose, steady but cutting. Travis Boone, you've had 20 years to fix yourself. 14 complaints, 2 internal affairs warnings, gambling debt, domestic disputes, suspension you hid under union protection. He gestured toward the folder in front of him. Every system that should have stopped you failed. But today, it won't. Boone leaned back, breathing hard. You think you can bury me? I'll sue this whole department, Vanessa interjected. You're welcome to try, but since the Department of Defense is a named witness, the case will be federal, and we'll use your son's email as evidence. Boone froze. My son? Vanessa met his glare. Cody Boone sent us your files. 14 complaints, 9 body cam deactivations. He did the right thing when you wouldn't. Boone's composure cracked. You turned my family against me? No, Vanessa said quietly. You did. Eli spoke then, his voice deep and calm. Sir, I don't hate you. You're a man who lost his compass. But the badge you wear isn't a shield. It's a mirror. Every choice you make reflects the people who trust you to serve them. Boone scoffed. Easy for you to say. You people live off honor. Out here, it's about survival. Eli shook his head. No, officer, it's about integrity. You survive without that. You're already dead. The room fell silent again. Delgado sat back in his chair, his breathing shallow from fatigue. Sergeant Washington, you've endured humiliation, trauma, and public exposure. You've shown restraint this department forgot it had. I owe you a public apology on behalf of every officer who ever failed to honor the uniform. Eli nodded once. Thank you. Chief. Vanessa tapped her screen again. For record, effective immediately. Officer Travis Boone is terminated for cause. With full pension revocation pending, Officer Kayla Roth will be demoted, mandated into psychiatric rehabilitation, and reassigned to non-field duties for 1 year. Departmental review will expand to include all prior body cam violations. Delgado looked to Boone. Travis Boone, hand over your weapon and badge. Boone rose slowly, his face a mixture of rage and disbelief. You're destroying me, he muttered. Delgado's tone was final. No. You destroyed yourself the moment you let your pride outrank your duty. Boone slammed his badge on the table. It rattled like a bullet casing. Then he walked out, head low, eyes burning holes into the floor. Roth stayed seated, weeping silently. Vanessa closed her folder. That concludes the tribunal. But Eli spoke again, his voice steady, carrying through the hum of the air vents. One thing before we finish. Delgado nodded. Go ahead. Eli looked at everyone. Vanessa, Maya, Roth, Delgado. When this video went viral, millions watched, and everyone said, look how calm he was. But calm isn't peace. It's what soldiers learn when no one else will stand between right and wrong. I stayed calm because if I'd raised my voice, the story would have changed. From a soldier humiliated to a threat eliminated. That's the weight I carry. That's the weight so many carry. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. I'm tired of calm. I want change. No one moved for several seconds. Delgado swallowed hard. You'll get it, Sergeant. That's a promise. Vanessa nodded solemnly. We'll start today, outside the glass walls. The press could only see silhouettes, but when the door opened and Eli stepped into the corridor, free and standing tall, The entire terminal erupted in applause. Roth followed a moment later, eyes red but head bowed, not from shame, but from the first spark of accountability. Boone was gone. Somewhere down the hall, his footsteps fading into silence. Delgado remained behind, hand pressed against his chest, breathing uneven. "For my son," he whispered, "and for his brothers who still believe." The tribunal was over, but the reckoning had only begun. 6 months later. The sun rose over Dallas with a softer kind of light. The Christmas wind carried the smell of pine and fresh bread through the quiet streets. At the Dallas Veterans Cemetery, rows of marble headstones stretched into the horizon, each one reflecting the pale winter sky. Master Sergeant Elijah Washington stood among them, his uniform crisp, his expression calm. For the first time in a long while, the calm felt earned. The wounds had faded, the cameras had moved on, but the truth remained, etched not in headlines, but in change. Boone was gone from the force, fired, pension revoked, his name now shorthand for arrogance undone by its own echo. The $1.8 million civil suit filed by the Department of Justice and Eli's legal team had stripped him of savings, leaving him working security at a mall in Arlington, scanning barcodes instead of badges. He'd grown a beard, avoided eye contact, and when people recognized him, he turned away. He wasn't violent anymore, just empty. Sometimes redemption doesn't roar. It just walks quietly in the opposite direction. Kayla Roth's story was harder. Demoted to desk duty. She spent her days filing reports and her nights in therapy. The PTSD she had buried so deep finally surfaced in the long, quiet hours. She wrote a letter to Eli every week for a month before finally sending one. "I see now that silence is its own kind of violence." It read, "You didn't deserve my fear. Thank you for your grace." She signed it Kayla R., and Eli never replied, but he kept the letter folded inside his jacket pocket, next to his bronze star. Chief Marcus Delgado retired 2 weeks after the tribunal. His cancer had worsened, and though the department begged him to stay through the reform process, he refused. "A new system needs new blood," he said in his farewell address. He donated his severance pay to a veterans' suicide prevention fund, the same one he'd created in memory of his son. He passed quietly 3 months later, a folded flag resting across his chest. When Eli heard, he stood in the same spot where they'd first met and whispered, "Semper Fi, Chief, you kept your word." Vanessa Park was promoted to Brigadier General soon after. Her congressional testimony about the DFW incident led to sweeping federal reforms in law enforcement bias training. Her words became policy. Her restraint became example. "Accountability isn't the enemy of policing," she told the Senate committee. "It's the armor that keeps justice alive." Amaya became the voice her father never intended to unleash. Her TikTok documentary, Uniform of Honor, won a Webby Award for Best Public Service Storytelling. The video had been viewed over 200 million times, and schools across the country began using it in bias awareness programs. When she was invited to speak before Congress, she wore a small red pin in honor of Delgado's son. "You can't teach courage," she said in her testimony, her voice steady and wise beyond her years. "You can only show it." Eli, now promoted to Master Sergeant and serving as a military liaison for community police relations, created the Uniform of Honor Foundation with Vanessa's help. The nonprofit focused on mentorship for veterans transitioning into civilian life, ensuring their stories didn't end in silence or suspicion. Each plaque on the office wall carried a soldier's name and the words, "Dignity has no color." The nation, weary of outrage, began to see the incident not as a wound, but as a mirror. Departments across Texas implemented new bias and de-escalation training programs. The Dallas Police Commission introduced the Delgado Protocol, requiring all body cam footage to be blockchain secured. Impossible to erase. Eli had insisted on that one. You can't lose what's locked in truth, he'd said, on that cold December morning. As the city prepared for Christmas parades, Eli and Amaya placed a wreath of white lilies at Delgado's grave. A small brass plate beneath the headstone read, "He stood between right and wrong and chose right. A young black recruit, barely 20, paused nearby. His uniform was new, stiff with pride. He looked at Eli with quiet admiration. "You're the sergeant from the video, aren't you?" he asked. Eli smiled faintly. "I used to be," he said. The recruit saluted. "Thank you for fighting for us, Sergeant." Eli returned the salute slowly. "Son, you fight for yourself now. That's the point." As they walked back toward the parking lot, Amaya looked up at him. "Daddy, do you think people really change?" He thought about it for a long moment, then said, "Not all at once, but piece by piece. They do, just like healing." Snow began to fall lightly, the flakes catching the sun like tiny metals in the air. Amaya smiled, snapping a picture for her next story, behind them. The wind rustled through the rows of marble, carrying with it the sound of something greater than victory. Peace. Eli stopped, looking back one last time, 6 months ago. That same Texas sky had burned with anger and humiliation. Now it shimmered with quiet forgiveness. He touched the folded flag beneath his arm and whispered, "We came home." And for the first time in years, he smiled, not out of pride, not out of relief, but from the simple grace of knowing that his story had meant something. Justice hadn't come in a roar. It had come in steady footsteps, through a crowd, into a courtroom, and finally, into the heart of a nation learning how to see again. Thank you for watching this story. If you believe in justice, dignity, and respect for every uniform, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Your voice keeps these stories alive.